The wildfires that have ravished Australia this winter have revealed a humble hero, the wombat. Wombats are unassuming underground creatures. They create complex tunnel systems beneath the earth, and they have allowed other animals searching for refuge from the bushfires to find sanctuary in their tunnels. Wombat houses have become safe houses for wallabies, lizards, rabbits, skinks, echidnas, and no doubt other Australian wildlife, those cute critter faces I would have to Google to find out what they look like. The fires would have been fatal for these animals if not for the welcoming shelter of the wombats' tunnels. If anyone at the White House is listening, hear this. Wombats have the compassion to welcome refugees, no matter if those in need are large or small, furry or scaled, or where we think they are supposed to live. Let's be like the wombats. Animals of different species have the instinct to realize that they all matter and that they are stronger together, as the wombat's example of spontaneous solidarity in crisis shows. Of course, the animal kingdom offers many other examples of beings supporting one another, more often within their own species. If you've seen geese flying in their famous V-shaped formation, you've seen a more systemic, ongoing form of mutual support. The Library of Congress quips that geese fly in a V because it's easier than flying in an S. Seriously. The geese take turns flying at the front of the V, dropping back when they get tired. Those who are flying behind the others face less wind resistance because of the ones in front of them. It's a bit like a race car drafting behind another car at the racetrack. The V formation also may assist with communication and coordination within the group. Geese know that they are stronger together, and they organize themselves to make the most of the strength they can draw from one another. Now, humans don't always find it so easy to let others help us, do we? Especially given the individualism and the dominant culture in this country. Many Americans grow up with the myth that a successful person pulls themselves up by their own bootstraps. The hero tackles adversity on their own and comes out on top on their own. No wonder it's lonely at the top. I couldn't help but notice in the reading, however, that at least half of the ingredients in the recipe for resilience involve other people. Listening, laughter, trust, family, friends, people who challenge us to grow into our best self, dogs and cats. The recipe itself is handed down from previous generations, and it is best served and shared with others. There's no recipe for resilience without other people. That would be like trying to make brownies without chocolate. And the truth is, people want to help. When I was in my early 30s, I was trying to get to the bottom of some mysterious health issues. I had to go to the hospital for a procedure that would require that I be sedated. I would need someone to drive me home. There were close friends I would not have hesitated to ask, but all were either working on the weekday when my procedure was scheduled or did not have a car. So I turned to a friend that I'll call Daniel. I knew Daniel from peace marches and social justice work at church. He's a writer and something of a professional social activist with a more flexible schedule than most of my working friends. Daniel and I had gone on walks and talked about our lives. We were friends. But he was not so close a friend that I wanted to impose on him for a favor or invite him into this vulnerable moment in a hospital. I didn't have any other ideas, however, so I asked. And Daniel was so pleased that I did. His face just lit up. He was absolutely happy to help in this simple way. I had no memory later of getting home from the hospital, but I knew I was in the care of someone that I could trust. had been wise to ask Daniel to help me. Not only did it get me through this moment of need, but it actually strengthened our friendship. I look back some years later now, and it occurs to me that it did not even occur to me then to ask for help from the caring team type group in the church where I was a member at that time. It has such a group, but this just didn't cross my mind. I considered myself an independent person, and I wasn't used to asking people for help. But my friend Daniel was glad to help me. It felt good to him being entrusted with this task. And that's how it is with the caring groups in this church, too, like the pastoral care associates who offer a listening ear, and the caring team, which is ready to help with practical needs like food and rides. I've heard from people involved in both of these groups expressing an eagerness to help others in the congregation. That's why they signed up to be a part of these ministries. They care, and they want to be there when other members have a need. They know that we are stronger together. We just have to remember to call upon those teams when the need arises. I hope you'll do better at that than I did when I had a need. I've heard plenty of stories of people here in the Westside community reaching out for support and others rallying around someone in need. Often it happens through informal friendship networks or the affinity groups that people are a part of. Last year, for example, when Susie Lotfin was at the end of her life, her covenant group drew around her and encircled her with care. Susie's life and her death still took their natural course, but it made a real difference to her in this difficult time just to have her friends around. Members of her covenant group have likewise shared that this connection was meaningful to them. They would not have wanted to miss out on this time with Susie. The gift went both ways. A few years ago, writer Jill Suttie reviewed the research literature on resilience. Resilience is the ability to skillfully cope with adversity, challenge, and crisis. Suttie found that even though much of the research focused on individual strengths, perhaps a result of the cultural biases of those conducting the studies, the research also shows that social support may matter the most. Good social relationships seem to help us tamp down stress reactions, even when we just recall those relationships, Suttie writes. Did you catch that? Even just remembering who is in our corner and that we are not alone, all by itself can be beneficial. A report from the World Bank lifts up how critical social support networks are to resiliency, especially for the poor and the vulnerable. Rugged individualism works a lot better if you are born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Perhaps it is largely a matter of privilege to be able to imagine that one's well-being and life chances are not dependent on a web of relationships with others. Kenny Wiley, a former writer and editor of the UU World, wrote about acclaimed author Maya Angelou's rise from a difficult period. She not only leaned on one friend, but tapped a cultural reservoir of resilience. Angelou turned 40 on April 4th, 1968, Wiley wrote of the novelist. She had planned a big party in Harlem with many of the day's Black intellectual elite among the guests. History had other ideas. Dr. King's assassination sent Angelou into a weeks-long depression. It was fellow writer James Baldwin who helped her dig out of it. Angelou recalls Baldwin's assistance in her book, A Song Flung Up to Heaven, where she writes that laughter and ancestral guidance got her through. This is what she said. There was very little serious conversation. The times were so solemn, and the daily news so somber, that we snatched mirth from unlikely places and gave servings of it to one another with both hands. I told Jimmy, James Baldwin, I was so glad to laugh. Jimmy said, "We survived slavery. You know how we survived? We put surviving into our poems and into our songs. We put it into our folk tales. We danced surviving in Congo Square in the New Orleans and put it into our pots when we cooked pinto beans. We knew if we wanted to survive, we had better lift our own spirits. So we laughed whenever we got the chance." That's the end of the quote. So how did Maya Angelou and James Baldwin and their ancestors cope with adversity? The way that peoples the world over have, but especially those under the thumb of oppression. They laughed and danced and ate together, finding strength in one another. People who have faced hardship know that banding together is the only way to make it through. We are stronger together, all of us. Now, if you don't feel inspired by wombats or geese, if you were unmoved by me and my friend Daniel, or by Susie Latfin and her Covenant Circle, or by Maya Angelou and James Baldwin, consider the teaching of the forest. I share with you words of hospital chaplain and professor Gary Gunderson from his book, Deeply Woven Roots. Roots, whatever. It is hard not to look up in awe into the high reaches of a deep and healthy forest, Gunderson writes. But the true story is in the dirt, the roots. And what is forest loam but fallen trees? Everywhere you look in a natural forest, you see trees on their way to loam and soil on its way to the sky. I think of a congregation and its surrounding community as a forest. We can see ourselves as one of the trees, taking comfort in the complex richness of our enduring connections. Although a forest may span many miles, Gunderson continues, any one tree has to grow where it happened to sprout, hoping to bear the fruit it can. Some are more resilient than others. Some keep growing, even after they are knocked down. But the big difference is whom they grow next to, whose roots tangle with their own. A forest's resilience reflects its diversity. Any one tree relies not just on its own roots, but on an interwoven fabric of roots. We humans are not so different than geese or wombats or trees. We need each other. We belong to each other. And this is not weakness. It is strength. We can build the deeply woven roots of friendship networks and communities, knowing that these will sustain us when our turn comes. We can lean into each other, knowing that we are stronger together. May each of us be there for others when they need us. And may each of us remember to call upon one another when we are the one who needs to draw strength from this forest to which we belong. May it be so. Amen.